Well, this lent me to my other thought, and we've said this before. You and I are very much pro-immigration because we think that is a big part. That's a big economic driver for our country.
Our main,
It's our main economic driver. Okay. Like there is another way to grow population, and that is for people to have more kids. And that's a novel idea. I know.
That?
You make it affordable for one parent to stay at home, or you make it more affordable to have childcare. You make it more affordable to have children, period. It is very expensive to have kids. They're expensive little buggers.
This is a big topic, and I don't know if we want to go down this rabbit hole, but do you think people are not having kids because of an affordability issue?
I think in some cases yes. Short answer, yes. And maybe it's more the difference between having 2 kids and 3 or 4, but that does have implications to your population growth.
Interesting. Do you think I don't know if we want to go down this rabbit hole, but the percentage of women that are working now, it changes like their design. Because I see a lot of them, they're like, if I have a kid, it screws up my whole career.
Yeah, that's definitely part of it.
I feel like that's a big one now. Like I feel like the last gen prior to us, the percentage of that would be so much different.
And some of that has been changing societal values, right? I think more women are career focused than maybe 2 generations ago because of what society embeds in people and gender expectations and all that sort of stuff. But I think also people often need 2 household incomes now to live.
Totally.
Right? So if either person wanted to, if one partner wanted to stay home, it may not be feasible.
Yeah.
Right?
No,
and if
sure.
you have a brood of children, someone probably needs to stay home because you are going to have differing ages and it's just not economically feasible. So you could argue that if everything wasn't so damn expensive, we would actually have more population growth because people could afford to have larger families. They could afford to have children earlier. A lot of the other reason that people aren't having as many kids is because they can't get out of crippling student debt until they're like 30. And who wants to bring
whipping out the student debt card?
Well, no, like we start our people off, behind the 8 ball, and so you can't start thinking about kids until you're in a financial, solid situation, or at least most people think that way.
I'd be curious what the difference between the birth rate in Canada and the States would be, because in the States you have way more student debt.
That's like one little factor, but I'm just saying.
I understand.
Like we have set people up to make it very financially hard to have children. And
do you think they should have an incentive to do so? Do you think it's better that we start producing in-house or the imports?
Producing in-house. We want to bring
look at them as a
production
commodity
back home. Well, like human capital is a commodity for sure. I think an incentive. I mean, that sounds so weird to be like,
give you $2,000 a month if you have a kid.
However, there are things like
kids.
Child allowances and stuff like that. I think the incentive would be making childcare more affordable. I think
get appraisals on their
trying to get the cost of living down a bit and all these things. Anyway, this just got me thinking that there are other ways to grow your population, but
you have digressed.
I have digressed. And again, we're very much pro-immigration, and I understand your school of thought, which is that you think there's going to be pushback against immigration because of the housing issue. It's not obviously coming with this particular government, and whether that's because this is the government's philosophy, or if this is because they genuinely feel we need the labor, or if it's because they think new voters almost...
Look at this water delivery. What is up?
Oh, my God.
Thank you.
Look at that.
Thanks, Producer Mark.
There's also always that cynical aspect that the government in power sometimes likes upping immigration because the sooner they can get those people to be voters, the better, because they're more likely to vote for the party that brought them into the country.
Let me hit you with this scenario.
Okay.
They give you $1,000 a month for each kid you have. You have like 10 kids living in your house.
Okay.
You appraise your house based on income approach.
Oh my God, I love it.
$10K a month.
What's the multiplier effect on this?
Imagine
on the set of twins I got.
People are going to be leveraging their homes for millions and millions. The average house in Canada is going to go up to like $5 million.
Yeah. It's like, listen, it doesn't have a walkout basement, but it does come with 2 kids.
Built-in bunk beds.
No, I mean, these are just interesting things to think about if we're going to have this conversation, if we really have this thing glaring in our face where we have to decide what our population growth looks for. And do you remember I talked about this one time? Because think of all these challenges and these questions we have, and then realize that our population as a world, like the entire Earth's population, is crescendoing right now.
I know.
It's
Elon
about
Musk
to roll
is very
over,
concerned.
right?
Yeah.
So we are soon going to have declining global population.
which is very sketchy.
And the whole everything, including our own economy, is predicated on more people, more people, more people, and we're going to be competing for the world's people. So maybe we're just getting a head start on everyone. Maybe that's the idea with this. But how's it going to affect housing?
Well, to bring it all the way
Jesus,
back
that was
to
a
Halifax,
long walk.
that was a long walk, and we're all the way back now to Halifax. We have people living in tents, and we've already known this, and it's happening across the country. It's happening across the states. Pretty much in most first world countries, it's taking place. And so this was just announced that Halifax has assigned a new tent location in Lower Sackville, which is a neighborhood here. It's a baseball field. They have 8 tents set up there.
I think I've already seen them there, yeah.
Have you? Yeah, they were originally down the road.
Yeah.
Well, people were interviewing people that are at the site, and there are people there with full-time jobs. So, like, this is the problem with bringing in so many people, and they're like, look, I was renting a hotel, and now they will no longer extend my stay after 3 months. And so now I'm literally here. And I'll be honest with you, I've had applicants that saying, we're in a tent right now, and we need an apartment. But it's a tough one on the receiving end. Like, I'm like, okay, of course I want to house these people, but then it's always like the question of like, is there something more to the story? And so there's a bunch of issues with that. It's like a moral dilemma. But this is where I go back to my whole thing of like why I think they might have to curb immigration. It's not because I want them to curb immigration. Like, I'm a second-gen immigrant myself. It's because I'm like, we are now having, and everywhere I went for a coffee this morning in the park across the street. Literally between every single tree, there was a tent. I drive anywhere there's like parkland in any of the downtown locations. I see them like snugged deep within the bushes all the way along our waterfront on the Dartmouth side. There are like literally, we can see it out behind us right now. There are tents snugged everywhere. So again, this immigration idea is amazing, and we are in the industry of basically people, and we need it, but we're doing nothing on the housing side to do this. It's great. Look, okay, maybe we don't need more industry within our country because we have some job vacancies, so we can actually employ all these people that are coming. What are we going to do with all these people that are coming? And they said the Fed's like, well, we're hoping they're going to go to more auxiliary areas. And I'm like, looking at Nova Scotia, the auxiliary areas are also totally and even looking at the auxiliary areas in Nova Scotia, they are full. Like Amherst is like, we need someone to come here. We will give you the land for free to build. New Glasgow, same thing. We're like, we'll pave. I think Amherst said they'll pave the roads. New Glasgow said they'll give the land away for free. Sydney's also on like a same mindset of like, we have great land. We'll sell it to you for very cheap with the right plan. So I don't know. This is I just wanted to put that in there. Like, where is this going? Again, immigration's amazing. I'm all for it.
I'm gonna
but where's the incentives to get some housing, or the government needs to just step up and build it themselves?
That's the only solution, but whatever. We pounded that drum. So I've a couple thoughts on all that because that's all really interesting and sad in a lot of cases. With Sackville, like you can always understand the situation around Halifax, like downtown Halifax and downtown Dartmouth. Yeah. Because easy transit, hospitals, support. This is why, unhoused people tend to move towards major centers. Yeah. To see it in a place like Sackville is a little bit more jarring because
you're 35 minutes from downtown.
Yeah, and so that is those are displaced individuals from literally within what some people call like a suburb. Yeah. Right? Like it's kind of a bedroom community to Halifax for people who aren't familiar. While there is the Cobequid Medical Center there, there's not as many things that you would think of in terms of resources and things available to these folks. So it's not a situation of they've come from other areas and all kind of accumulated in one area and increased that density. These are people who presumably were in apartments in Sackville up until just recently. So it is quite jarring to see that. It comes down to supply, man. Like there's no vacancies
There was
anywhere.
also discussion of fear of being moved because they found that when they went to the encampments within the peninsula, that once they became too dense, then the city would intervene. And so there's a hope that like if we can keep this to a small group of 10 or 12 of us, they might not move us around as much. Yeah.
And I mean, in my passing by those tented areas, they were some of the, I hate to say this, but like tidier and
exactly.
Whereas some of the ones here in town have unfortunately gotten a little bit in rougher shape. So I can understand them saying like, no, we feel comfortable here. This is also the community that we're used to. We want to stay there. Yeah.
One thing I want to say that I think like makes a lot of sense, and we've said it before. Why like, why don't they just say, like, boom, emergency action team, we take a piece of surplus land and we just build a properly sized building to house like a homeless shelter, basically. Why can't they just go out and build something like that immediately? They've done these
They who?
temporary city or even like
The city has one. They have no housing mandate, so they don't have any
the
funds.
province.
earmarked
Then
for
I
it.
guess
Right? And they can't do it on land that's not theirs. And most of the vacant land that you can think of that's actually
province
a
land.
resource is province owned.
I understand. When I say city, I mean city or province.
Yeah. Why does the province do it?
Either party. Why don't they step up to the plate? Because realistically, the amount of money that needs to go out, like,
I mean, the provincial government is too concerned with buying your votes by like blocking Nova Scotia Power rate hikes and rent control. That's what their focus is on.
True.
So
I just don't understand the insanity at this point. This is not like a new issue that's been happening. It's been years now. And I'm like, if they had started some sort of project, we would have something. Even their temporary encampments took like a year to build, and their trailers that are in a parking lot.
If they had started an 80-unit dwelling on the same date that they started those temporary, that search for those temporary units, they would be fully occupied by the spring. Not now, but by the spring, they'd be fully occupied, those 80 units. And realistically, they wouldn't even do 80 units. They'd probably do like micro suites that 80 actually ends up with like 160 bedrooms. Like that would have been done in this spring if they had started it back then.
Is there a single permanent structure under construction to help with this?
Gosh, that's a phenomenal question. I think there's some like co-op and housing trust stuff.
Co-ops and housing trusts.
They're small, 6
exactly.
units here, 12 there, maybe 18 here.
That's the stuff that I think is insanity to me.
They're waiting for the private sector to bail them out while at the same time just demonizing the private sector in the media.
That's what I mean. Like, how can the private sector bail them out if they're going to hammer them with all the, like you said, regulation constantly and demonizing them?
Yeah.
Like it's anyways, I saw that and I was like, this is nuts that we continue to kind of just operate and people aren't pushing harder on this. And somehow I'm surprised it doesn't take more media hold that like this is taking place. And meanwhile, everyone's fired up. They're like, oh, Timmy
Doesn't
stepped
click
up
well,
to
man.
hit.
Doesn't click
Mara.
well. Here's my other concern. And I hate to put this out to the universe because I'm worried that it's going to be true. If you look at these periods of big influx of, immigrant population simultaneously around a recession, it doesn't tend to be good for relationships between people who have maybe been here for multiple generations and new to country. People get really ignorant really quickly. And if we do have massive job loss at the same time that there is a massive influx of new labor that maybe takes some of those jobs, I'm worried for what the fallout of that is from a political knee-jerk. People are dumb idiots when it comes to this stuff.
People are dumb idiots, and they are completely irrational and ignorant in some of the stuff that they say and do and how they act. But one thing I'll say that I see, and I can see how people, like, it will heighten their, let's say, anger, is that, like, I have immigrant workers working for me right now. They're not under my payroll, but they're through companies that I hire. And those companies are getting payroll incentives to hire the immigrants. And so it makes more sense for them to hire an immigrant than it does to hire a local person.
Right. And no one cares right now because all the local people that want jobs kind of have jobs. For the
they
most
also
part, right?
all have jobs. But again, once, like you said, it turns over.
Yeah, once they don't have the jobs.
And they get laid off because they cost twice as much as the immigrant worker next to them who just came here.
Yeah.
Like, is that's, and then I can
I'm just
see
worried
where
that's a powder keg. Like, I spent a lot of time in Europe right after they opened the EU, and all the Eastern Europeans like flocked to England, and like the tension was palpable in some instances.
Yeah.
Very, highly densely populated country, a very traditional country in a lot of sense because the whole colonial history of Great Britain, like all that stuff was there, and then this massive flux of immigrants at a time when then things fell off a cliff in the EU, and you look at some of the rise in nationalism, conservatism, and all these like far right. It coincides with some of that, and you hate to envision something like that in our country. But I just worry if we have a recession at the same time as we bring in a bunch of immigrants, I could see that being.
they can fix all this.
All right, fix it, Neal.
Just give us some housing incentives. We'll do so much construction that everyone gets a job. Jobs for you, jobs for them, jobs for all of us. Everyone's super pumped.
You get a job. You get a job.
Everyone gets a job. Rents come down. There's housing all over the place. No issues.
Yeah.
Done. Fix it.
And inflation continues at all time highs.
And inflation continues at all-time highs. But it's sweet because you buy something today and then you can return it tomorrow for more money. Think about it. Right now, people love it. You can buy a car and then you drive for 2 years and you bring it back and get more money than you paid.
Money's imaginary. Just keep kicking it down.
I mean, it literally is.
When I was broke, I had rich habits. When I was broke, I had rich habits.